A new neighbor moved in on a Tuesday afternoon, and I remember that clearly because Tuesdays were the days I worked from home. When I heard furniture scraping across concrete outside my apartment, I knew someone new had signed a lease they probably hadn't thought through very carefully. I watched from my kitchen window as the moving truck parked in the slot directly across from mine. Same floor, same hallway, close enough that I wouldn't be able to ignore him even if I wanted to. He was alone the entire time. There were no friends helping, no family standing around giving directions, just him and a man from the moving company whose irritated expression suggested he'd been paid to carry silence along with the boxes. The new neighbor was tall, but not in a way that stood out. His hair was brown and neatly kept, like he still cared how it looked even while lifting furniture. He wore a dark hoodie despite the weather, and every few minutes he glanced down the hallway as if checking whether someone was watching. I stepped back from the window before he could look up and notice me. His name appeared on the mailbox that evening. Evan Rowe. That night, my best friend Maya came over with takeout and a bottle of wine. She lived 2 floors below me and had a habit of knowing things before I ever said them out loud. "You saw him, didn't you?" she said as she kicked off her shoes. "The new guy?" I asked. "Yeah, I noticed him." She smiled. "Don't act like you didn't already decide what kind of person he is after one glance." I told her he seemed normal, which was true, at least on the surface. What I didn't tell her was that when I took my trash out later that night, his apartment door was open just enough for the light inside to spill into the hallway, and he was standing behind it, completely still. He wasn't hiding, and he wasn't watching me directly. It looked more like he was waiting for something to happen. The next morning, I ran into him in the elevator. He smiled before I did. "Hey," he said, "you live across the hall, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm Leela," he said, cutting in easily. "I know." I assumed he had seen my name on a package or a delivery label. People notice things, especially in apartment buildings. That explanation felt reasonable enough to accept. He asked what floor I worked on, and when I told him I worked from home, he nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he had already suspected. After that, Evan began appearing everywhere in my daily routine, not in a dramatic or obvious way, and never in a way that sounded alarming if I described it to someone else. He was in the hallway when I left for groceries, in the lobby when I checked my mail, and on the stairs whenever the elevator took too long. He was always polite and brief, and he always ended the conversation first. My coworker, Josh, noticed before I did. He came over one evening to help me set up a new router, and he paused mid-sentence when someone knocked on my door before I could even reach the handle. Evan spoke from the hallway. "Your internet went out around 3 today, right?" Josh looked at me immediately. I frowned. "Yeah, how did you know that?" Evan shrugged casually. "Same wiring stack. It happens all the time in this building." Josh waited until the door closed before speaking. "You didn't mention having a neighbor who tracks your internet outages," he said. "He doesn't," I replied too quickly. "It's just building stuff." Josh didn't argue with me. But when he left, he sent me a text from the parking lot. "Lock your door." I laughed it off at the time. Then Evan started commenting on my sleep. The first time he mentioned it, his tone was casual enough that I almost convinced myself it was harmless. "You're a light sleeper," he said, while we waited for the elevator. "You move around a lot after 2. I stared at him, unsure what to say. "I mean, the floors here are thin," he added. "You hear things." I told myself that explanation made sense. The second time, his comment was far more specific. "You stopped waking up at 3 this week," he said. "That's probably better for you." After that, I stopped responding to him altogether. I began staying at Maya's apartment more often, changed my routines, and stopped wearing headphones at night so I could hear what was happening around me. One evening, Maya asked why I kept checking the hallway camera feed on my phone. "You're not paranoid," she said carefully, "but something isn't right, and I can feel it." That night, I heard someone trying my door handle. The movement wasn't aggressive or rushed. It was careful, deliberate, like someone testing to see if I had remembered to lock it. I didn't move, and I focused on keeping my breathing steady while the handle turned once, then twice, before finally stopping. The footsteps moved away down the hallway. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It read, "Sorry, wrong apartment." I contacted building management, hoping they would take it seriously. Instead, they told me Evan had already filed a complaint. He had reported noise coming from my apartment, specifically someone pacing between 2:40 and 3:10 in the morning, and they wanted to know if that was me. I told them it wasn't. That was when everything shifted. Evan stopped smiling, stopped making eye contact, and stopped appearing by coincidence in his place. Small changes began appearing around my apartment door. My doormat was turned sideways. The welcome sign hung crooked. A footprint appeared near my door that didn't match my shoes. Josh offered to stay over one night, around 2:50 a.m. He sat upright suddenly. "Do you hear that?" he asked quietly. I listened, and that's when I noticed the sound. Someone was breathing just outside the door. Josh opened it without warning, but the hallway was empty. What wasn't empty was the space across from Evan's apartment, where the security camera indicator light had been switched off. The next day, I noticed something new at the mailboxes. Beneath Evan's name, a second name had been scratched faintly into the metal, almost erased, but still visible. It was mine. I confronted him that afternoon. He didn't deny it or apologize. "I needed to know you were real," he said calmly. "People lie online, and people lie in buildings like this. I never gave you permission," I told him. He tilted his head slightly. "You never told me not to." I filed a police report, but the questions they asked made it clear nothing would come of it. Had he touched me? Had he threatened me directly? Did I have proof? I didn't. 2 days later, Evan moved out without warning. There was no truck and no notice. He was simply gone. Relief should have followed, but it didn't. A week passed, then 2. One night, my phone notified me that a new device had accessed my home Wi-Fi network. The device name didn't belong to anything I owned, and the login location wasn't familiar either. The device was active at that exact moment. I unplugged the router immediately, and seconds later my phone buzzed again. A text message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "You sleep better when you don't know I'm there." I ran to Maya's apartment, but she didn't answer the door. Her neighbor told me she had left earlier with a man who matched Evan's description perfectly. The police found Evan 3 days later in a storage unit a few miles away. Inside, they discovered notebooks filled with schedules, floor plans, and handwritten observations. There was a list of names. Mine had been crossed out. Under it was Maya's, and beneath hers was a new apartment number that didn't belong to my building. I moved out 2 weeks later, choosing a place with no shared walls and no familiar routines. Last night, I heard someone standing in the hallway outside my door. They weren't walking away. They weren't knocking. They were waiting. And the part that frightens me most is that I didn't feel surprised at all.